She was just 12 barefoot, hungry, and invisible to the world. He was a millionaire, drowning in guilt, hiding behind skyscrapers and secrets. But when their worlds collided in one life-changing moment, she didn't just save his life. She uncovered a truth that shattered everything he thought he knew. What he whispered in her ear, it made her cry, not from pain, but from something far deeper. This is not just a story. It's a piece of someone's hidden pain, quietly waiting to be heard. In today's story, we dive into a moment that can change everything, in the most unexpected way. Before we begin, where are you listening from? Canada, the US, Norway? Let us know in the comments, because stories may begin anywhere, but they connect us all. Stay with us until the very end, because sometimes, what breaks your heart can also heal it. And if you believe stories can change lives, hit subscribe. Join our journey. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Your voice matters here. The wind whispered through the narrow alleys of East Briarwood like it had secrets to tell. Secrets no one had time to hear. Not in a place where every breath was survival and every street lamp flickered like hope on its last matchstick. Brick buildings leaned against each other like tired elders, their paint long gone, their stories etched in the cracks and graffiti. At the farthest corner of this forgotten neighborhood stood a crumbling laundromat. No sign, no windows, just a rusty door that groaned when you opened it. And behind that laundromat, tucked beneath an awning of broken gutters, slept a little girl on a flattened cardboard box. Her name was Arielle. She was 12, barely, but her eyes carried a heaviness that didn't belong to children. Skin the color of burnt mahogany, hair matted into tight coils she couldn't afford to comb, hands bruised from scouring dumpsters for things no one should have to need. She clutched a tattered notebook to her chest every night as if the words inside could keep her warm. Arielle had dreams. She wrote them down like spells, believing maybe one day they'd cast her out of this darkness. But every sunrise brought the same hunger, the same silence, the same feeling that no one anywhere was listening. Miles away in a glass tower in the heart of the city lived Julian Merrick, CEO billionaire, broken. No one knew that part about the breaking. The world only saw the money, the headlines, the sharply cut suits. No one saw the pills on his nightstand or the grief in his bones. His daughter had died 6 months ago. Since then, Julian had stopped believing in people and miracles, even in himself. 2 souls. One fighting to live, one forgetting how. They never should have met, but fate doesn't ask for permission when it weaves. One cold evening, as the rain pounded the city like an angry drum, their paths collided, violent, fragile, sacred. She found him. He was bleeding, barely conscious, slumped beside a dumpster behind her laundromat, and what he whispered to her would change everything. The day had begun like any other in East Briarwood, gray and mean. Arielle sat behind the laundromat, sketching faces in her notebook. Not real ones, faces she imagined were kind, gentle. With eyes that smiled before lips did, she drew one of those faces every time her stomach growled. It helped her forget, even if only for a minute. Around her, the world groaned in rust and broken promises. The streets stank of oil and hopelessness. The only music was the distant hum of traffic and the occasional shout from someone arguing with life. She wore a threadbare hoodie 2 sizes too big and shoes held together with tape. Her fingers were numb. Still, she wrote, "One day, I'll live in a house with blue shutters. I'll have a big white dog named Storm. My room will smell like cinnamon." She paused, then scribbled, "But today, I have this page." Arielle didn't know her father. Her mother had vanished 3 years ago during one of her long walks. A neighbor fed her when she could, but pride often kept Arielle hidden. She'd learned to survive without being seen. That afternoon, it began to rain. Not gently, angrily. The kind of rain that feels personal. Arielle curled up under her plastic sheet, arms around her notebook, watching puddles swell and spill over. Then she heard it, a thud, like something heavy had fallen. Followed by a low groan. She froze. Another groan, her heart pounded. Maybe it was a drunk, or worse. But then, a wheezing cough, muffled weak. She peeked out from behind the dumpster. There he was, a man slumped against the wall, soaked, bleeding from the side. His shirt, once white, was dark with crimson. His eyes barely open. "Help," he whispered, barely audible over the rain. "Please," Arielle's breath caught. Rich men didn't end up in alleys like this. He had a watch on his wrist that looked like it could feed her for years, but he looked broken. Not just his body, but his spirit, like he'd been cracked from the inside. She inched closer, trembling. "Mister." His eyes fluttered open, blue, gray, lost. He reached toward her, weakly. "Don't call anyone, please." Arielle didn't know why she did it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was that part of her that still hoped the world could be different. She ran. Not away from him. She ran to find bandages, a water bottle, anything. When she returned, he was unconscious. She pressed the water to his lips, cleaned the blood with her sleeves, wrapped his side with strips torn from her only blanket. For hours, she stayed by him in the rain. Finally, he stirred, groaned, and then he looked at her. Well, his voice cracked. "You saved me," he said, as if stunned. Then more quietly, God, you look just like her. Arielle blinked. Like who? His eyes filled with tears. He reached up, touched her cheek, and whispered something that made her freeze. Something that made her chest ache in a way she didn't understand. I thought I'd lost you forever. The rain had stopped, but the chill it left behind clung to everything like a ghost. A thin mist curled around the broken bricks of the alley, softening the city's harsh edges, but not enough to make it beautiful. Arielle sat on the cold ground beside the strange man, her hands shaking from more than just the cold. She didn't know what he meant. I thought I'd lost you forever. The words rang in her ears over and over, bouncing around in the empty spaces left by a life that had too many questions and never enough answers. I don't understand, she whispered, wiping a mix of rain and sweat from his forehead with the sleeve of her hoodie. His skin was burning hot. Fever. He blinked slowly, like it took effort. You look like her. My daughter. Arielle leaned back a little. I'm not her, she said firmly, voice rough like gravel. I don't have a daddy. The man closed his eyes, chest rising and falling unevenly. She was 12, just like you. Loved music. Had this laugh, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Arielle's throat tightened. She didn't laugh like sunlight. She didn't even remember the last time she laughed. His hand trembled, reaching toward her again before falling limply to the side. Name was Leela, he murmured. Sarah accident. 6 months ago. She didn't make it. Arielle's breath caught. Not because she knew Leela, but because the way he said it, like each word broke him more, felt too familiar. I'm sorry, she said softly. It was all she could offer. That and the worn-out blanket wrapped around his legs. He tried to sit up, failed. She pushed his shoulder gently. Don't move. You'll make it worse. Despite everything, he chuckled, dry and cracked. You're bossy. You're bleeding, she replied. For a moment, the mist swirled around them in silence. Then Arielle asked the question she was scared to know the answer to. What happened to you? The man didn't respond right away. He blinked slowly, trying to remember, trying to piece it together. I was leaving my office late. Walked to the garage. 2 men, they had masks. Thought I was someone else maybe. Or maybe they didn't care. Took my wallet. Hit me, I must have run. Or crawled. I don't know. Arielle looked down at his suit, ripped and dirty. He didn't look like the kind of man who belonged in her alley. What's your name? She asked. Julian, he said hoarsely. Julian Merrick. The name meant nothing to her, not yet. But the city knew him. The papers worshipped him. CEO of Merrick Holdings, a tech giant, a billionaire with more power than some countries, and now, broken and bleeding beside a girl who hadn't eaten in 2 days. Do you have family? She asked. Julian's expression hardened. Not anymore. Arielle nodded slowly. She understood the hollow H of those words. She lived them every day. He turned his head toward her. Why did you help me? The question surprised her. Not because it was odd, but because no one had ever asked her why she did anything. People like her weren't supposed to do things that mattered. She shrugged. You looked like you were dying. His lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. Maybe I was. Arielle stood. I'll get more water. No. Wait, Julian said, coughing. It's not safe. Someone might come back. She hesitated, then slowly sat back down. Minutes passed. The city moved somewhere beyond the alley, sirens, horns, distant arguments. But here it was just the 2 of them. A girl with nothing. A man who had everything but had lost the only thing that mattered. Julian studied her face. What's your name? She hesitated. Arielle. Arielle, he repeated. That's a strong name. She didn't feel strong. You live out here? He asked. She nodded. Alone as she nodded again. Something changed in his face. Not pity. Something more like shame. You don't deserve this, he whispered. I'm used to it, she replied. No one should get used to this. Arielle didn't answer. She just looked at him, at the bruises blooming across his jaw, at the blood drying on his side, and the way his hands shook when he tried to move. For the first time, she realized something strange. He was scared. The rich man, the powerful man, was scared. I'll stay with you tonight, she said, just in case. He nodded. The silence stretched again, this time heavier. As night crept in, she curled up near him, not touching but close enough to hear his shallow breathing. Before sleep took him, he mumbled one last thing. I used to believe in miracles. Then Leela died. Arielle turned her head toward him. Maybe you just weren't looking in the right places, she whispered. She didn't know why she said that. Didn't know how deeply it would echo. Didn't know that tomorrow, the whole world would learn who she was. Morning came slow and reluctant, the sky a canvas of pale gray, heavy with clouds that seemed undecided about whether to cry again. The alley was soaked, the ground cold and slick beneath Arielle's thin blanket. She stirred awake first, rubbing her eyes and instinctively checking that her notebook was still under her hoodie. It was. She turned. Julian was still alive, but just barely. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale, and his brow beaded with sweat. Whatever strength he had left was fading fast. Arielle knew this couldn't go on much longer. He needed real help. Medical help. But who would listen to a homeless black girl showing up at a hospital with a half-dead white man in a $1,000 watch and torn designer shoes? They'd think she did it. She chewed her lower lip, eyes darting as she calculated her options. She could try to flag someone down, maybe that old lady who ran the corner shop. But no, she didn't speak English very well and always looked afraid. The other people in the neighborhood barely noticed Arielle existed. She needed someone who would care. Then, suddenly, a siren, not far off, faint but moving closer. Her chest tightened. She shook Julian gently. "Mr. Merrick, Julian, wake up. Someone's coming." His eyelids fluttered. He looked lost. "Lila," he murmured. "No, it's me, Arielle," she said firmly. "You need to wake up." His head lolled to the side. The siren grew louder, and then the moment cracked. A man in a postal uniform rounded the corner of the alley, talking into his phone. Arielle's heart dropped. She froze, but then the man saw them, his eyes widening at the sight of Julian slumped against the wall. "Oh my God!" the postman shouted, rushing over. "Hey!" "Hey, what happened? Is he okay?" "I don't know," Arielle said quickly. "He was here last night. He's bleeding." The man stared at her, confused, suspicious. But he pulled out his phone again and started shouting into it, calling 911. Within minutes, flashing lights filled the alley, red and blue bouncing off wet brick like shattered glass. Uniforms stormed in. Voices yelled. Stretchers rolled. Arielle backed away, terrified. 2 officers stepped toward her. "Is this your father?" one of them asked. She shook her head. "Did you hurt him?" "No," she cried, stepping back. But before they could press her further, a medic shouted, "Sir, we've got a positive ID. This is Julian Merrick." Everyone froze. One of the EMTs turned, shocked. "The Julian Merrick. Get him in now," someone ordered. "Call his security team. And the press, they're going to swarm this scene." That's when everything spiraled. Journalists arrived within 30 minutes, like vultures with lenses, snapping photos of Julian's battered body being wheeled into an ambulance. A cluster of cops tried to clear the street, but they couldn't stop the chaos. Someone saw her. A small girl, standing alone near the crime scene tape. A camera zoomed in. "She's the one who found him," a voice shouted. Suddenly, a dozen lenses turned toward Arielle. "She saved Julian Merrick. No, she might have been involved." "Who is she?" Arielle panicked. She turned and bolted, notebook clutched to her chest. But someone followed her. A young woman, not with a camera, but a clipboard and worried eyes. She caught up a block later. "Wait," she called. "Please don't run. I saw what you did." Arielle stopped, breathing hard. She turned, ready to fight or flee. The woman held up her hands. "I'm not with the press. My name is Ava. I'm with Child Protective Services." Arielle froze again. CPS, she'd been warned about them. Other kids told stories, how they'd take you, separate you, lock you in homes where no one cared. Sometimes they never let you go. "I'm fine," Arielle said, stepping back. "You're not fine," Ava said gently. "You've been sleeping on the streets. You're 12, aren't you?" Arielle said nothing. Ava stepped closer. "Listen to me, that man Julian, he's alive because of you. The world's gonna want to know who you are. But right now, you need safety, warmth, a bed." Arielle's stomach growled loud enough for both of them to hear. Her eyes stung, but she wouldn't cry. "Will I get to see him again?" she asked. Ava smiled softly. "We'll try. But first, let's get you someplace warm." Arielle hesitated, then nodded. As Ava led her away, the city behind them buzzed louder. Across television screens, phone alerts, and online headlines, the world learned of the mysterious girl who saved a billionaire. And in a hospital room high above the skyline, Julian Merrick opened his eyes slowly. The first word he whispered wasn't nurse or pain or where am I, it was Arielle. Julian Merrick lay in a hospital bed wrapped in layers of sterile white sheets, sunlight pouring through the floor, to ceiling windows of the private suite. The scent of antiseptic floated in the air, but it couldn't mask the ache in his ribs or the weight in his chest. He stared blankly at the ceiling, heart thudding in the painful silence between beeps of monitors and murmurs outside the door. He whispered her name again. Arielle. Not because he wanted to hear it, but because he needed to. Because somehow, that girl had shattered something in him that had long gone numb. And now, something else had begun to crack. Julian hadn't cried in years. Not since the accident. Not since Lila's laughter disappeared like a song cut mid-note. He had buried that version of himself, the father, the man who cared. In his place, a machine had risen, building companies, making millions, appearing powerful. But that girl's face, those eyes, they weren't just familiar, they were haunting. His assistant Nora entered the room quietly, holding a thick brown envelope and a tablet. She paused, observing his distant expression. "She's safe," she said softly. Julian blinked, turning toward her. The girl, Arielle. Child Protective Services has her in temporary care. Media's already calling her the Alley Angel. Nora walked to his bedside, then added, she doesn't want to talk to anyone. Not the press. Not CPS. Not even us. Julian's throat tightened. She doesn't trust people. Not surprising. Nora hesitated, then set the brown envelope on the tray beside him. Sir, I found something. About her. His heartbeat quickened. She slid a photo from the envelope, a worn file marked with faded stamps and water stains. A familiar city seal. Julian stared. Then his hands began to tremble. This is a birth record. Yes, Nora replied. Dated 12 years ago. The name Arielle Grace Donovan. Julian paled. Donovan? He whispered. As in Renee Donovan. Nora nodded. Julian leaned back, vision spinning, memories slamming into him like fists. Renee, 12 years ago, he had met Renee Donovan at a charity event in Harlem. She was stunning, articulate, sharp as glass, working with a nonprofit that helped young women out of homelessness. She challenged him like no one ever had. For 6 months, they had something real, something honest. But the board disapproved. The world disapproved. He was a rising star in tech. She was a struggling social worker with no pedigree and skin that didn't match his. When she got pregnant, fear took over. Julian made a decision that would haunt him forever. He paid her to leave. He didn't want scandal. He didn't want distraction. He didn't want her, or the baby. But Renee never cashed the final check. She disappeared, and now, all these years later, he gasped, she's mine. Nora nodded solemnly. Yes, all the timelines match. And Julian, there's more. She handed him a folded letter, aged, the paper yellowing and brittle. I found this sealed in the back of the file. Addressed to you. From Renee? The Julian's fingers trembled as he opened it. Dear Julian, I don't expect you to read this. I don't even expect you to care. But I need to write it. I'm keeping the baby. Her name is Arielle, and she is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I don't want your money, Julian. I wanted you. But I guess I was foolish to believe you could love someone like me. Still, I hope you live a good life. Arielle will grow up knowing she was born of strength, not shame. I will protect her from the coldness you showed me. She will never be a secret. She will never feel unwanted. I just wish she could have known the man I once thought you were. Renee. Julian folded the letter slowly, then covered his eyes with his hand. He didn't cry, he wept. For the girl who had risked her life for him. For the woman he abandoned. For the 12 years he had let a piece of himself walk the earth unknown, unloved by him. He had built empires but lost his own blood. Nora placed a hand gently on his shoulder. What do you want to do? Julian looked up, face raw, voice shaking. Find her. Bring her here. I don't care what it takes. She has to know. Nora nodded and turned to leave. Just before she stepped out, Julian said quietly, and Nora, yes. Don't let the press near her. She's not a story. She's my daughter. Outside the hospital, the city buzzed with headlines, praise, and speculation. But in a small CPS shelter downtown, Arielle sat cross-legged on a cot, sketching faces in her notebook. Faces of people she dreamed about. Kind people. Safe people. The ones she never got to meet. She had no idea that her next visitor wasn't coming with a microphone or a camera, but a truth too heavy to carry alone. The shelter smelled like bleach and canned soup, clean but empty. Arielle sat on the edge of her narrow cot, her notebook open across her lap, pencil clutched in one hand like a lifeline. She sketched slowly, each stroke a thought she didn't know how to say out loud. This time she wasn't drawing strangers. She was drawing him, Julian, that tired, bloodied face. The eyes that had looked at her like they'd seen a ghost, like she mattered. That was new, unfamiliar, scary. Her fingers paused as her stomach tightened. He'd called her Leela. At first, she thought he was just confused. But something about the way he said it, about the tears, the whisper, felt like more than confusion, like recognition. And it wasn't just that, it was what came after. The name he'd whispered, Arielle. How had he known? She hadn't told anyone her last name in years. Most didn't care to ask. No, the shelter workers were acting strange, offering her hot cocoa, folding her clothes for her, smiling too much. Like she was someone important. Or fragile. She hated it. She wasn't fragile. She was scraped raw. She hadn't seen the news, but she heard whispers, words like hero, billionaire, mystery girl. None of it mattered to her. What mattered was surviving the next day, the next hour. A soft knock on the office door broke her thoughts. She tensed. A moment later, Ava walked in, the social worker who'd found her. She looked nervous. Arielle, Ava said gently, there's someone here to see you. Arielle's spine straightened. Press. No, Ava said, sitting beside her on the cot. Not press. It's Julian Merrick. The pencil dropped from Arielle's fingers. She didn't move. Her hands clenched her notebook like it might disappear. Hay says he knows you. Ava continued carefully. That he met your mother a long time ago. That he might be connected to you. In a very personal way. Arielle stood slowly. Her heart thumped against her ribs. What kind of personal? Ava looked down, then met her eyes. He says he's your father. The room fell silent, not the kind of silence that settles. It crashed, loud, sharp, unforgiving. Arielle didn't blink, didn't cry, just stared at Ava like she'd spoken in another language. She turned slowly toward the hallway where Julian was waiting. He stood at the end of the corridor, hands trembling, eyes locked on the girl who now, without question, had his daughter's nose, his mother's chin, and the same furrow between the eyebrows when confused. He wanted to run to her, but he stayed still. Arielle stared. No one spoke. Then she whispered, "You left her?" Julian's breath caught. "Arielle? You left my mom?" she said louder, arms tightening across her chest. "You gave her money and told her to go." His mouth opened, closed. "I was scared. I was young. I thought I was doing the right thing. For you," she snapped. "Not for her? Not for me?" Julian stepped forward, cautiously. "I didn't know she kept you. I didn't know you were out there. If I had. But you didn't try to find out?" She cut in. "You never looked." Her voice cracked, but she didn't let it break. "You just moved on." The Julian looked down, ashamed. "You're right. I did. I didn't deserve her. I don't deserve you." Silence again. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the letter. Renee's letter. He held it out, hand shaking. "She wrote this. For me. For you. Please read it." Arielle didn't move. Julian waited. After a long pause, she whispered, "Why now?" He looked at her with damp eyes. "Because I was bleeding in a cold alley, thinking I was going to die, and a little girl held my life in her hands. And when I looked at her, I saw the thing I'd been running from for 12 years. She swallowed hard. "You mean me?" "I mean home," he said. His voice was soft now, no longer the voice of a CEO, just a man begging for forgiveness. "You don't have to talk to me. You don't even have to forgive me. I just want to do something right for once." Arielle's lip trembled. She stepped back. "I'm not ready." The Julian nodded slowly, pain flashing across his face. "Okay, I'll wait. I don't want your money," she added quickly. "I know," he said. "I want to give you something more than that. A chance. A family. A name." She looked away, the ache inside her rising like a storm tide. Without another word, she turned and walked back into her room. Julian stood in the hallway frozen. He had found his daughter, but she had closed the door. The city was humming with curiosity. News anchors battled over exclusive interviews. Bloggers speculated about everything from Julian Merrick's mysterious disappearance to the identity of the alley girl who saved him. Tabloids twisted the story into fairy tales and scandals, depending on who was buying. Every street corner, every phone screen, every cafe television repeated the same headlines. MYSTRELD SARVIS BLIONIRCO, MRKIFO and DY12-year-old homeless Gerald safety dagichtar. But behind the flashy headlines, something real and raw was breaking open inside Julian Merrick. For the first time in 12 years, he was drowning in a guilt no press coverage could absolve. His daughter had been within reach. She had saved him. She had looked into his eyes and called him what he truly was, a coward. He deserved it. Julian stood at the window of his penthouse office, the skyline glittering in the evening haze. The city never slept. But tonight, neither would he. He turned away from the window, loosening his tie with trembling fingers, and walked to the small chest in the corner of the room. It was Leela's, her things. He opened the lid carefully, like touching the past might break it. A music box, a bracelet, a tiny scarf with unicorns, and at the bottom, photos of him holding her, his old life, his lost life, and now a second chance, one he hadn't earned, was standing just blocks away behind a door she wouldn't open. Julian closed the chest slowly. He turned to Nora, who had been standing quietly nearby. "I need to speak publicly." Nora blinked. "A press conference. Not a confession." She raised an eyebrow. "Julian, if you go on air and admit what you did, abandoning Renee and Arielle, it could destroy your image. Your board will explode. Stocks might drop. People don't forgive stories like this." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Julian said. "I'm telling the truth. For once." He paused. "And not for them. For her." Nora watched him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll set it up." The next day, national live broadcast. The conference room was filled with journalists, camera crews, microphones, and anticipation thick as fog. No flashy banners. No corporate logos. Just Julian Merrick sitting behind a plain desk, eyes sunken, suit creased. Human. He cleared his throat. Cameras flashed. Then he began. 2 weeks ago, I was assaulted and left for dead in an alley behind a laundromat in East Briarwood. I should have died. I was bleeding, broken, and I didn't care if I made it. He paused, letting the silence fill the room. But someone did. A child, a girl. He looked into the camera. Her name is Arielle, and she is not just the girl who saved my life. She is my daughter. The room exploded with murmurs and gasps. Julian didn't flinch. 12 years ago, I made a mistake. I turned my back on someone who deserved better. I was afraid. I was selfish. And because of that, I missed every birthday. Every tear. Every scraped knee. I missed her. He swallowed hard. She's lived a life I can't imagine, cold, hungry, invisible, and I stood at the top of towers pretending I had everything. He shook his head. I had nothing. A pause. Arielle, if you're watching this, I don't want your forgiveness. I want your trust. I can't give you back the years I stole, but I can give you everything I have left. A home, a name, a place to grow, and love, not because you saved me, but because you are mine, a deeper breath. So today, I'm pledging more than words. I'm setting up a foundation in your name, the Arielle Grace Initiative, to support children living in homelessness. You showed me what it means to be brave, to be human. Now I want to honor you, not as a headline, but as a daughter. Cameras flashed again. Reporters shouted questions. But Julian stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out, ignoring every shout behind him. He wasn't there to sell a story. He was there to make a promise. Later that night, Arielle sat on a couch in Ava's office, watching the broadcast replay on a small TV screen. Her face was unreadable. She'd listened to every word. She'd heard the cracks in his voice. She didn't know what to do with the emotions it stirred: anger, confusion, sorrow, and something dangerously close to hope. He said your name like it mattered more than his, Ava said softly. Arielle didn't respond. Ava reached into a small envelope on the table. He left this. Said it was the only thing he had left from your mother. Said it belonged to you. Inside was a thin silver chain, its charm shaped like a quill. Arielle touched it gently. Her mother had told her once, "You'll write your way out of this world, baby. You're meant to." She closed her fingers around the charm. Slowly she whispered, "I'm not ready." "You don't have to be." Arielle looked out the window. Somewhere beyond the skyline, a man had finally spoken the truth. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. Rain came again, soft this time. Not the angry kind that beat against rooftops and flooded alleyways, but a gentle whisper, tapping on windows like fingers too shy to knock. Arielle stood beneath the awning of a boarded-up community center, arms folded tightly, her hoodie soaked through. The streets of East Briarwood smelled like wet concrete and rust. The air carried memories she had tried to forget. This place used to feel like a second home. When her mother, Renee, was still alive, they'd come here after long days searching for shelter. The center used to run a warm meal program twice a week. Volunteers smiled like real smiles, not the fake ones Arielle had learned to spot. They had books, blankets, music nights. Her mother loved music, said it healed the parts of her no one could see. But the city pulled the funding. The lights shut off. The door was padlocked. That was 3 years ago. Now the paint peeled in sheets and weeds grew where laughter used to live. Arielle didn't know why she came back. Maybe to feel close to her mother. Maybe to remember who she was before her face appeared on every screen in the country. She stepped out from under the awning, her shoes squishing in the puddles, and crept toward the back of the building. She knew where the weak spots were, where the bricks were loose, where kids used to sneak inside when the staff wasn't watching. At the corner near the collapsed fence, she crouched and pushed aside a warped plank of wood. Behind it was a crawl space she hadn't been in since she was 9. Her knees ached as she ducked inside. The old basement air was stale. Dust clung to her throat. But the smell had hit her like a memory she didn't ask for. Soap, paper, cinnamon gum. Her mom's breath, her warmth, the feel of her arms wrapped tight. She turned on her flashlight, the beam flickering across forgotten furniture and broken filing cabinets. It wasn't much, but she could almost hear her mother's voice again, telling her stories, reading poetry, whispering dreams into her ear. And then a loose floorboard caught her eye. She stepped closer. It was just slightly raised, barely, but enough to look wrong. Her fingers pried at the edge, the wood groaning as it lifted. Beneath it, something wrapped in an old cloth, a metal rusty, dent-covered. She knelt, heart pounding, and slowly opened it. Inside were a few old Polaroids, one of her and her mother sitting on the steps of the center, both laughing. Another of her mother holding a newborn, her. There were 2 crumpled bus passes, a faded drawing of a house with blue shutters, and a folded letter, sealed in a plastic sandwich bag. Arielle pulled it out carefully, breath trembling. For Arielle, it said in her mother's handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My brave girl, if you're reading this, I guess the world has forced you to grow up faster than I ever wanted. I'm sorry. I tried, baby. I tried so hard to protect you from all of it. But life doesn't always give us the things we deserve. I know someday you'll want to know why your father wasn't there. The truth is, he was scared. And maybe he didn't love me the way I hoped. But that doesn't mean he didn't love you. He just didn't know how yet. I didn't want to fill you with anger. I wanted you to grow up with a heart wide enough to forgive, and strong enough to walk away if you had to. You are made of light, Arielle. Fierce, beautiful light. You don't need anyone to complete you, but if someone wants to walk beside you, let them earn that place. Forgive when you're ready. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. Love louder than the world is quiet. And never forget, I have always been proud of you. Mom, tears blurred the words before she could finish. Arielle folded the letter gently, clutching it to her chest. Her mother had known this day might come. Had known she'd need something to hold on to when the world got too loud, too confusing. She sat in the dust for a long time, hugging her knees, the tin open beside her. Rain tapped softly on the basement windows above. Somewhere outside, cameras probably still searched for her. People probably still debated her life without knowing it. But down here, there was only love, only her mother's voice in her head, and something else, a small whisper inside her heart rising above the noise. Maybe it's okay to open the door. Just a little. She stood slowly, tucking the letter into her notebook, and carefully placed the other items back inside the tin. She resealed it and tucked it away again, just in case someone else needed it one day. By the time she emerged from the crawl space, the rain had stopped, and the sky was glowing faintly orange. Arielle pulled her hoodie tighter around her shoulders. She was still scared. But for the first time since the alley, she wasn't running. The sun dipped behind the high rises as dusk painted the city in deep purples and silvers. Arielle stood near the back entrance of Langston Tower, her breath clouding in the cool air, fingers trembling inside her sleeves. For days she had avoided this moment, evaded every reporter, every school official, every city staffer who wanted a comment, a signature, a quote. But Julian Langston was the only person she needed to hear from. She still didn't know if she wanted answers, forgiveness, or just to scream at him. Her heart thudded as she slipped through the maintenance gate. No one stopped her. Security had likely been loosened after the national media died down. She wore the same worn hoodie and jeans, but her shoes were clean. She remembered her mother used to say, "When you face your past, step like you belong there." A janitor named Louise, a kind man with a limp who once gave her an apple, nodded quietly and held the door open. She mouthed, "Thank you." The private elevator took her to the penthouse. She didn't knock. She wasn't sure why. When the doors slid open, Julian was standing in the middle of the large open room, holding a cup of untouched coffee. He looked older than he did on TV, softer around the eyes, like sleep had left him and never returned. Their eyes met. For a long time, neither of them moved. Finally, he whispered, "I hoped you'd come back." She said nothing. Just walked past the marble countertop and sat at the edge of the plush, expensive couch, like someone who didn't know if she was allowed to touch anything. Julian sat across from her. Not too close. Not too far. Just enough space to make room for everything unsaid. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally, voice flat, eyes staring at the floor. Julian exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for years. "I didn't know at first," he said. "Your mother never told me." Arielle looked up sharply. "She said you left because you were scared." He looked away, ashamed. "I was. But not in the way you think." She waited, daring him to tell the part that mattered. Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes distant. "I met your mother when I was still just climbing, still building Langston Tech from nothing. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room and change the whole temperature, you know what I mean?" Arielle nodded, barely. She was strong, fierce, but I was selfish, focused on deals, investors' image. She told me she was pregnant after we'd already started drifting apart. I told her I wasn't ready. I didn't say, "Don't have her." But I didn't say, "I'll be there," either. His voice cracked. "I buried myself in work. Then one day, I looked up, and you were 6 years old, and I didn't know where you were." She never asked for money, never contacted me again, and I was too much of a coward to try harder. Arielle's chest tightened. Her throat burned. "Why did you care all of a sudden?" she asked, her voice rising. "Why did it take me pulling you out of a car for you to care?" Julian's face broke. "Because that day when I opened my eyes and you were there, something in me knew. Before anyone told me. Before the reports, before the blood tests. I knew." He swallowed hard, and I hated myself more than I ever thought possible. Silence filled the space between them like fog. Arielle wiped her face quickly with her sleeve. "I'm not a headline," she whispered. "I know. I'm not some charity project you can fix with scholarships and trust funds. I know." She stood. "I don't want your money. I didn't offer it." She looked at him, eyes full of every birthday he missed. Every night she cried herself to sleep. Every moment she'd begged for a father's face in a sea of strangers. "You left her alone." "I did." "You left me." "I did." "Then why are you sitting there acting like you're sorry now?" Well, Julian stood slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "Because I am." For a moment, Arielle wanted to run, to scream, to throw something. But her mother's voice echoed in her heart, "Forgive when you're ready. Not because they deserve it, but because you do." "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said. "You don't have to. I don't know if I want you in my life. I'll stay out of it if that's what you need." She stared at him, then asked the question that had haunted her since the alley. "What did you whisper?" That day I pulled you out of the car." Julian looked down, ashamed, eyes glistening. I said, "God, please don't let me die. I need to meet her." Arielle's breath caught. "Not save me? Not, I'm scared. But I need to meet her." But for the first time, she saw the truth behind the man. Not the billionaire, not the absentee father, just a broken man, facing the wreckage of his choices. She turned to leave, not saying a word. But as the elevator door closed behind her, she whispered back, "I haven't decided yet." The auditorium of Langston Academy buzzed with quiet anticipation. Rows of journalists, students, city officials, and curious strangers filled the velvet chairs under golden lighting. A large banner behind the stage read Langston Foundation Youth Awards, celebrating tomorrow's voices. It was meant to be a night of hope. But for Arielle, it felt like walking into a battlefield. She stood backstage, peeking through the curtain. Her face was calm, but her fingers clutched the edge of her dress, blue satin, donated by a fashion house after her story went viral. She hated it. It wasn't her. It felt like a costume someone else picked out for a life she didn't ask to live. Beside her, a woman in a headset said, "You're on in 5. She nodded stiffly. Across the room, Julian Langston adjusted his tie nervously as cameras began to roll. This was the first time he'd be seen in public since their private meeting. The world hadn't forgotten the footage of the little black girl pulling the tycoon out of the burning wreck. But the story had twisted in the media since. Part miracle, part scandal. Whispers of a hidden daughter. Talk of abandonment. Praise mixed with judgment. Julian had kept silent. Until tonight, he walked onto the stage to polite applause. His speech was rehearsed, clean, words about youth, courage, redemption. But Arielle wasn't listening. She was watching his hands shake. The host returned to the podium. And now, to present our final and most prestigious award for heroic courage beyond measure, please welcome Miss Arielle Bryant. A spotlight hit her. The room fell into a hush. She stepped out. Her sneakers squeaked on the polished floor. Her dress shimmered under the light, but her face was unreadable. As she reached the microphone, she saw Julian just a few feet away. Their eyes met, and then she turned to the audience. She paused. A long silence stretched. People shifted in their seats. Then she said, slowly, clearly, "I didn't come here for an award." A murmur rippled through the room. "I didn't pull a man out of a car to get my picture on a magazine or to have my name trending on Twitter. I didn't do it for applause." She looked down, steadying her breath. "I did it because someone was dying, and I didn't want to watch another person disappear." Her voice trembled but didn't break. "I've lost too many people already. My mom worked 3 jobs and still died in a hospital hallway because no one heard her crying. My neighbor died waiting for an ambulance that never came, and for most of my life I thought my dad had died too." She looked directly at Julian. But he was alive. He just didn't want to know me. A gasps echoed. A few phones went up, recording. Julian's expression tightened, but he didn't flinch. And then, one day, I saved him. Not because I knew who he was, but because I didn't. He was just someone scared, bleeding, stuck under burning metal. He was human. That's all. Arielle stepped away from the mic, her hands open at her sides. "So no, I don't want this award." She turned to the host and gently handed back the plaque. "I want something that no foundation or check can give me." Silence. Then a whisper from the back. "What do you want?" She turned to the audience again. "I want to know that kids like me matter before we go viral. I want to know that the next Arielle doesn't have to be half dead or holding a billionaire's hand to be seen. I want to know we don't have to burn for someone to say, 'You belong here.'" The crowd was stunned. Some began to clap, soft, slow, reverent, then more joined in, until the applause rolled through the room like thunder. But Arielle didn't smile. She walked off stage straight past Julian, who stood motionless. Cameras zoomed in on him, expecting a response. Instead, he stepped forward and did something no one expected. He took the microphone. Hands trembling, he faced the sea of eyes. "I wasn't the one who was brave," he said softly. "I was the one who was broken." He glanced toward the curtain, where Arielle stood just out of sight. "She saved my life. Not just my body, my soul, and I didn't deserve it." The room was silent. "I abandoned her. I failed her mother, and I let fear rule me for too long." He stepped back, pulled out a small folded letter from his pocket. "This is the first thing I ever wrote as a father. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed the world to know the truth, from me, not from headlines." He left the letter on the podium and walked off stage. As Julian passed Arielle, he paused. He didn't touch her, didn't speak. But he looked her in the eyes, nodded once, and walked away. For the first time, the billionaire didn't try to fix the moment with money or words. He just let it be. Rain tapped gently against the window panes of the old Langston estate, now a youth center being renovated under Arielle's guidance. The once polished marble floors were stripped down to bare concrete. Paint buckets lined the walls. Kids' laughter echoed from distant rooms. mixed with the humming of drills and the scuff of new beginnings. Arielle stood in the main hall, looking at the plaque that would soon hang near the entrance Langston, Bryant Center for Courage and Community. Her name, side by side with a man whose shadow had once haunted her childhood, now engraved into a future neither of them could have imagined. Julian had kept his promise. After that unforgettable night on stage, he disappeared from the media storm, but not from her life. They met in private, at her mother's old grave in New Hope Cemetery. He wore no suit that day. Just a gray sweater and eyes heavy with years of regret. "Your mom," he'd said, kneeling by the headstone. "She was the kindest soul I ever knew. And I left her alone to raise you because I was a coward. I didn't want the world to know I'd fallen in love with someone the world didn't think I should love." Arielle had stood still, heart silent. Julian had reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a locket. Faded, cracked, but still glimmering. "I found this in a box I kept locked away for 12 years. He'd whispered, placing it in her hand. Inside was a photo. Her mother's glowing smile and a tiny newborn girl wrapped in a blanket, her name written in pink ink, Arielle Joy. Tears had slipped from her eyes then, hot and quiet, and then Julian had leaned in and spoken words that shattered her. "I kept thinking I didn't deserve to be your father, but the truth is I never stopped wanting to be. It was not grand, not poetic, just raw." And in that moment, something inside her cracked. Not in pain, but in healing. He hadn't said, "I'm sorry," the way everyone else did. He'd said, "I wanted you." And that made her cry harder than the flames, the poverty, the years of waiting ever had. Now, standing in the new youth center, Arielle looked around at the fresh life blooming around her. Tariq ran past, chasing a soccer ball. He was 12, just like she'd been when it all began. His mom now worked as the head cook in the center's cafeteria. Dozens of other kids came each day, kids with stories like hers. Kids who didn't need saving. Just someone to say, "You matter?" Julian entered from the side hallway, carrying a box of books. His gait was slower now, humble. "Human." "I found something in the storage room," he said, setting the box down and pulling out a framed newspaper article. Arielle Bryant, the girl who ran into fire. She smiled faintly. "God, I hated that headline." He chuckled. "You didn't run into fire. You ran into truth." They stood there a moment, not as billionaire and street kid, not as strangers or DNA-bound guilt, but simply father and daughter. "You ready?" he asked. She nodded. Together, they walked outside where a crowd had gathered in the courtyard. Kids, volunteers, neighbors, teachers, donors, and even city officials stood beneath a banner, "Opening Day Langston Bryant Center." Arielle stepped up to the mic, no longer afraid of silence. "I was told once," she began, "that a single act of courage can change everything." She looked at the children in the front row. "But I've learned that real courage isn't pulling someone from a wreck. It's choosing not to let what wrecked you define who you'll become." A beat passed. "This building isn't for me. It's for every kid who ever felt invisible. Every girl who thought her dreams were too small for a city this big. Every boy who learned to run before he learned to ask for help." She turned toward Julian. "And it's for second chances, even the ones that come 12 years late." The audience stood in thunderous applause as she cut the ribbon. Julian lingered at the edge, watching her glow, no longer in his shadow, but in her own light. Later that night, as the crowd dispersed, Arielle sat alone in the garden behind the center. The stars were out. The city skyline glowed in the distance. Julian joined her on the bench, quiet. He handed her a letter. "It's the trust transfer. I'm stepping away from the Langston board. I want you to lead this with full freedom. You've earned it." Arielle opened the folder, skimmed the contents, and then folded it again without a word. "I didn't ask for this," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "But you built this. That matters more." As she looked up at him. "What happens next?" she asked. He smiled gently. "Whatever you choose." Arielle leaned back, eyes to the sky. Her voice was low, nearly a whisper. "You whispered something to me that day in the graveyard. Do you remember?" Julian nodded. "Every word." "Say it again," she said. He looked at her. Eyes filled with the weight of time, but lighter than before. "I never stopped wanting to be your father." And once again, tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of something softer. Something like peace. But in every city alley and broken dream, someone like Arielle is still choosing fire over fear and rewriting what love looks like.
A lonely millionaire, haunted by his past, opens his door to a little girl with tear-filled eyes who whispers words that shatter his world. As their lives intertwine, buried truths emerge, wounds reopen, and love finds its way through heartbreak, leading to a choice that will change them forever.